Catherine Sinclair gazed out of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side. The New York skyline glittered before her like a sea of stars, but all she felt was emptiness. At 32, she had everything money, could buy designer clothes, luxury vacations, and a social calendar that would make celebrities envious. Yet her 5-year marriage to Maxwell Blackwood, heir to the Blackwood financial empire, had become nothing more than a gilded prison. "Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood called to inform you he won't be joining you for dinner tonight, again." The housekeeper's voice interrupted her thoughts, her tone carefully neutral, though Catherine detected a hint of pity. "Thank you, Marta. You can tell the chef to prepare something light for just me." As Marta left, Catherine returned to staring at the city lights. Another night alone in a home that had never truly felt like hers. She remembered how it all began, a calculated arrangement between two of New York's most influential families. The Sinclairs, with their century-old real estate empire, and the Blackwoods, with their financial kingdom stretching from Wall Street to international markets. "It's not just a marriage, Katie. It's a merger," her father had explained, his eyes alight with ambition rather than concern for his daughter's happiness. "The Blackwoods need the prestige of old money, and we need their financial backing. Maxwell is a good match." Catherine had agreed, believing she was fulfilling her duty to her family. After graduating with honors from Princeton, she had briefly entertained dreams of establishing her own architectural firm, but those aspirations were quickly set aside for what her parents called a greater purpose. The wedding had been the social event of the year, a lavish affair at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, covered by every major publication. Catherine remembered smiling through it all, telling herself that love could grow with time. But from their wedding night, Maxwell had been cold and distant, treating her more like an acquisition than a wife. "You'll be the face of the family," he had told her clinically on their honeymoon in Santorini. "Organize charity galas, maintain our social connections, and represent the Blackwood name with dignity. That's what I need from you." For years, Catherine had tried to fulfill that role perfectly. She organized fundraisers that raised millions for various causes, maintained their penthouse with impeccable taste, and presented herself as the ideal Blackwood wife at every social function. But no matter how flawlessly she performed, Maxwell remained unmoved, his approval always just beyond reach. Their conversations grew increasingly brief, limited to practical matters and social obligations. The emotional distance between them expanded until it became an unbridgeable chasm. Catherine found herself living with a stranger who shared her bed, but never her life. The true crisis began when, after 3 years of marriage, Catherine had still not conceived. Maxwell, fixated on continuing the Blackwood legacy, grew increasingly frustrated. "My father had 2 heirs by the time he was my age," he told her. One night, his voice cutting through the silence of their bedroom, "A Blackwood needs to secure his legacy. It's not just about having a child, it's about having a son." Catherine had endured countless medical consultations, fertility treatments, and invasive procedures. Each month brought renewed hope, followed by crushing disappointment. Maxwell's patience wore thinner with each passing month. "Perhaps there's something wrong with you," he had suggested one evening, not looking up from his financial reports. "My doctor says I'm perfectly healthy. The Blackwood men have never had problems producing heirs." The humiliation burned through Catherine. Soon, Maxwell's mother, Eleanor Blackwood, a formidable woman whose approval Catherine had desperately sought, began making thinly veiled comments at family gatherings. "Such a shame when a woman can't fulfill her most basic purpose," she would say while sipping her martini, her eyes fixed pointedly on Catherine. "In my day, we understood our duties." Catherine had endured it all silently, her resolve to make her marriage work growing weaker with each cutting remark. The turning point came 6 months ago, when she noticed Maxwell's sudden interest in Vanessa Pierce, the ambitious head of investor relations at Blackwood Financial. At first, Catherine dismissed her concerns as paranoia. But then came the late nights at the office, the business trips that mysteriously required both Maxwell and Vanessa, and the occasional whiff of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Catherine confronted him once, only to be met with cold denial and accusations of hysteria. "You're being ridiculous," Maxwell had said dismissively. "Vanessa is a valuable employee. Perhaps if you focused more on giving me a son instead of inventing problems, our marriage would be in better shape." Catherine retreated further into herself, the walls of her golden cage closing in. She poured her energy into her charity work, particularly a foundation supporting education for underprivileged girls. It was the only aspect of her life where she felt she was making a genuine difference. Tonight, as she stood alone in her penthouse, Catherine's phone chimed with a message. It was from Maxwell, not even bothering to call. "Family dinner at Eleanor's tomorrow night. 7 p.m. sharp, wear something appropriate. Important announcement to make." Catherine's stomach tightened with apprehension. Maxwell's important announcements were rarely good news for her. She composed herself and typed a simple "I'll be there" in response, wondering what fresh humiliation awaited her. The following evening, Catherine arrived at Eleanor Blackwood's opulent Upper East Side mansion precisely at 7. The Blackwood family dinners were always formal affairs, more like board meetings than family gatherings. She wore a conservative navy blue dress that Eleanor had once complimented, a rare occurrence that Catherine had filed away as a small victory. Maxwell was already there, standing with his father Richard and younger brother Thomas. He barely acknowledged Catherine's arrival with a curt nod. She greeted Eleanor with the customary kiss on both cheeks, inhaling the older woman's overpowering Chanel No. 5. "Catherine, dear." "Timely as always," Eleanor said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "At least you're consistent in some things." Catherine had learned to let such comments slide off her like water. She took her assigned seat at the immaculately set dining table, noticing an extra place setting. "Are we expecting someone else?" she asked. Before anyone could answer, the doorbell rang. Moments later, Vanessa Pierce walked in, looking radiant in a red dress that hugged her curves. Catherine felt her heart drop as Maxwell stood to greet her, his hand lingering on Vanessa's lower back as he guided her to the seat beside his, directly across from Catherine. "Now that everyone is here," Maxwell announced, raising his glass, "I have something important to share." Catherine gripped her water glass tightly, her knuckles turning white as she braced herself for what was to come. The silence around the Blackwood dining table was deafening as Maxwell remained standing, his crystal champagne flute raised. Catherine felt every eye on her, a mixture of anticipation and something worse, pity in their gazes. "As you all know," Maxwell began, his voice smooth and controlled, "continuing the Blackwood legacy has always been my highest priority. After much consideration, I've made a decision that will secure our family's future." He placed his free hand on Vanessa's shoulder, who beamed up at him with undisguised triumph. "Vanessa and I are expecting a child, a son, according to the latest tests." The champagne in Catherine's glass trembled as her hand shook. The room seemed to tilt sideways, and she forced herself to take a steady breath. Eleanor Blackwood's small gasp of delight cut through Catherine like a knife. "Furthermore," Maxwell continued, his gaze deliberately avoiding Catherine, "Vanessa has agreed to become my second wife. We'll be married in a private ceremony next." "Huh?" Richard Blackwood frowned slightly. "Maxwell, that's not exactly legal in New York." "It won't be a legal marriage in the US, of course," Maxwell clarified. "But we'll have a ceremony in our Cayman Islands property, and Vanessa will be recognized as my partner in all family matters. The paperwork regarding the child's legitimacy and inheritance rights is already being prepared by our attorneys." Thomas, Maxwell's younger brother, glanced uncomfortably between Catherine and Vanessa. He alone seemed troubled by the announcement, while Eleanor was already embracing Vanessa warmly. "This is wonderful news," Eleanor declared. "A true Blackwood heir. At last, we must start planning immediately." Catherine sat frozen, the humiliation washing over her in waves. Not only had Maxwell been unfaithful, but he had also impregnated his mistress and was now presenting this betrayal as a solution to their problems, which he had always framed as solely hers. "Catherine," Maxwell finally addressed, her directly, his tone businesslike, "I expect you to handle this transition with dignity. The Sinclair-Blackwood alliance remains important to both our families." She looked up at him, this man she had tried so desperately to please for 5 years, and saw nothing but cold calculation in his eyes. No remorse, no compassion, just the ruthless pragmatism of a businessman closing a deal. "And where exactly do I fit into this new arrangement?" Catherine asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Maxwell cleared his throat. "You'll maintain your position as my first wife and continue your social and charitable obligations. You're living. Arrangements, however, will need to change. Vanessa will be moving into the master suite next week. I've had the East Wing guest rooms prepared for you." The guest rooms, like a visitor in her own home. Catherine felt something inside her crack, not her heart, which had already been broken by years of indifference, but rather the chains of obligation and duty that had kept her bound to this marriage. "I see," she said simply, placing her napkin beside her untouched plate and rising from her chair. "If you'll excuse me, I'm not feeling well." "Catherine," Eleanor's voice was sharp with disapproval, "this is a family celebration. Surely you can set aside your feelings for one evening." Catherine looked at the woman who had never truly accepted her as family. "I've set aside my feelings for 5 years, Eleanor. I think I've earned one night off." Without waiting for a response, she walked out, her head held high despite the burning humiliation. The taxi ride back to the penthouse was a blur. Catherine moved through the spacious rooms that had never felt like a true home, touching surfaces, looking at artwork she had carefully selected to please Maxwell's tastes rather than her own. It all seemed like props on a stage now, part of a performance that had finally mercifully come to an end. She poured herself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the terrace, letting the cool night air wash over her. For the first time in years, Catherine allowed herself to really feel the depth of her unhappiness, the crushing weight of trying to be someone she wasn't, of bending herself into impossible shapes to earn love that had never been offered. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Marta appeared at the terrace door. "Are you all right? You're home earlier than expected." Catherine turned to look at the housekeeper who had witnessed her quiet suffering for years. "Marta, please call me Catherine, and no, I'm not all right, but I think I might be eventually." The next morning, Catherine awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She dressed carefully in one of her most expensive suits, armor for the battle ahead, and made her way to her regular appointment with Dr. Melissa Chen, the fertility specialist Maxwell had insisted she see monthly. "Mrs. Blackwood, I wasn't expecting you today," Dr. Chen said, surprise evident in her voice when Catherine entered her office. "Your next hormone treatment isn't scheduled until next week." "I'm not here for treatment," Catherine replied, taking a seat across from the doctor's desk. "I want to see my complete medical file. Every test, every treatment, every medication I've been prescribed." Dr. Chen hesitated. "Your husband usually reviews those." "I'm the patient," Catherine interrupted firmly, "and I have a right to my own medical information." After a moment's consideration, Dr. Chen nodded and pulled up Catherine's file on her computer. As Catherine reviewed the detailed reports, a pattern began to emerge that made her blood run cold. For the past 3 years, she had been taking a daily medication prescribed by Dr. Chen, supposedly to regulate her hormones and increase fertility. But the medication listed wasn't a fertility drug at all. "This medication," Catherine pointed to the screen, "what exactly does it do?" "Doctor." Chen frowned. "That's Provolone. It's primarily used to treat certain hormonal imbalances, but it has a well-documented side effect of suppressing fertility. We wouldn't prescribe this to someone trying to conceive." Catherine's mind raced. "But you've been prescribing it to Amy for 3 years. The doctor shook her head, confusion evident on her face. "I never prescribed this to you. Your primary care physician must have—" "I don't have another doctor," Catherine interrupted. "Maxwell insisted I only see specialists he approved." Dr. Chen turned to her computer, typing rapidly. "According to your file, this prescription was added to your treatment plan on direct instruction from Dr. Harold Wells." "Who is Dr. Wells?" "He's the Blackwood family physician. He submitted the prescription with a note saying it was to be administered alongside your fertility treatments. But—" Dr. Chen's voice trailed off as understanding dawned on her face. But it would ensure those treatments never worked. Catherine finished, a cold rage building inside her. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Maxwell had never wanted her to conceive. He had deliberately sabotaged her fertility while publicly humiliating her for failing to provide an heir. Mrs. Blackwood, Catherine, this is a serious breach of medical ethics. If what you're suggesting is true— It is true, Catherine said with certainty. And I need copies of everything, all my records, the prescription orders, everything. Can you do that for me? Dr. Chen nodded solemnly. I'll have it ready within the hour. And Catherine, I'm so sorry. When Catherine left the medical building, she carried a thick folder containing irrefutable evidence of Maxwell's betrayal. The Manhattan streets bustled around her, but she walked in a bubble of cold clarity. For 5 years, she had been a pawn in Maxwell's game, manipulated and controlled for reasons she still didn't fully understand. But games had rules and players. And Catherine was done being a pawn. She took out her phone and scrolled to a contact she had never used, Olivia Hernandez, a former classmate from Princeton who had gone on to become one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in New York, known especially for her work with women from wealthy families trapped in abusive marriages. As the phone rang, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the stirring of hope, and beneath it, something more powerful. The first, embers of determination igniting into resolve. Olivia Hernandez speaking. Olivia, it's Catherine Sinclair. Catherine Blackwood now. We were at Princeton together. She took a deep breath. I need your help. Catherine? Olivia's voice warmed with recognition. Of course I remember you. What can I do for you? Standing on the busy sidewalk with New Yorkers rushing past and the city pulsing around her, Catherine felt a sense of purpose crystallize within her. I need to take my life back, she said firmly, and I think I'm going to need a very good lawyer to do it. Olivia Hernandez's office overlooked Bryant Park, the greenery providing a stark contrast to the sleek, minimalist interior. Catherine sat across from her former classmate, the medical records spread between them on the glass conference table. This is— Olivia shook her head, her expression a mixture of professional assessment and personal outrage. Catherine, what Maxwell did isn't just cruel, it's potentially criminal. Medical fraud at minimum. Catherine nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. In the 3 days since her discovery, she had moved through shock, grief, and rage, finally arriving at a cold determination that felt unfamiliar, but empowering. I don't just want a divorce, Catherine said. I want justice, and I don't care what it costs me. Olivia studied her client carefully. The Blackwoods are powerful enemies to make, Catherine. They don't just have money, they have influence. Politicians, judges, media executives, they're all in Maxwell's pocket. So was I, Catherine replied. But not anymore. Olivia's mouth curved into a slight smile. All right then, let's talk strategy. She leaned forward. A normal divorce case would focus on the division of assets, alimony, that sort of thing. But this— She tapped the medical records. This changes everything. We have leverage. I don't want his money, Catherine said firmly. That's admirable, but think strategically. The Blackwood fortune isn't just Maxwell's, it's generational. Wealth built on the backs of others. Taking your fair share isn't greed, it's redistribution. Catherine considered this. What do you suggest? First, we document everything. I'm bringing in a private investigator I trust completely, Jessica Reeves. She'll help gather evidence of Maxwell's other indiscretions. I doubt Vanessa is his first affair. She isn't, Catherine confirmed, but I never had proof. You do now, Olivia said, gesturing to the medical records. But we need more. We need to understand his business dealings too. The Blackwoods present themselves as financial royalty, but empires that size don't maintain themselves without cutting corners somewhere. Catherine felt a flicker of unease. I don't know much about Maxwell's business operations. He's always kept me away from that side of his life. That's by design, Olivia said. Men like Maxwell compartmentalize. They keep their wives as decorative accessories, deliberately excluded from the machinery that generates their wealth. She paused, studying Catherine. But you're smart, Catherine. Princeton honors graduate. You planned to be an architect before you married him, right? Catherine nodded, surprised that Olivia remembered. Intelligence is intimidating to men like Maxwell. He needed you diminished, focused on producing an heir and planning dinner parties. Olivia's eyes gleamed. But now it's time to use that brain of yours. You lived with him for 5 years. You heard things, saw things. You know more than you think you do. Over the next few weeks, Catherine worked closely with Olivia and Jessica, the private investigator. She moved out of the penthouse into a modest but elegant apartment in Chelsea, using funds from her personal account, money from her grandmother's inheritance that Maxwell had never been able to touch. True to Olivia's prediction, Catherine discovered she knew more than she realized. Years of silent observation during dinner parties and charity events had given her insights into Maxwell's business connections, his patterns, his vulnerabilities. She remembered casual conversations between Maxwell and his associates, snippets of information she had filed, away without realizing their significance. Sanderson International, Catherine said during one of their strategy sessions. Maxwell mentioned they were a key investor in the Singapore project, but I remember overhearing him tell Thomas that Sanderson was a shell company created to hide the real source of funding. Jessica made a note. That's consistent with what I've found. The Blackwood Financial Group has dozens of shell companies, many in tax havens. But proving financial fraud requires documentation. What about Franklin Edwards? Catherine suggested. He was Maxwell's CFO for years until they had a falling out last spring. Maxwell fired him rather publicly, something about irregularities in his expense reports, but Franklin seemed more angry than embarrassed. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Her disgruntled former executive could be a goldmine. I'll find him. As the investigation progressed, Catherine found herself coming alive in ways she hadn't experienced in years. Her analytical mind, long suppressed beneath the veneer of the perfect society wife, awakened with new purpose. She spent hours reviewing financial reports, connecting dots and identifying patterns that even Jessica's trained eye had missed. Meanwhile, Maxwell seemed unconcerned by her departure. According to Olivia's sources, he had told associates that Catherine was taking some time to adjust to the new arrangements and was expected to come to her senses eventually. Vanessa had already moved into the penthouse, appearing at his side at social functions, proudly displaying her growing baby bump. He's underestimating you, Olivia observed during a late-night strategy session. That's good. The element of surprise is powerful. Catherine nodded, but she felt a twinge of something unexpected, not anger or humiliation, but pity. Maxwell's arrogance had blinded him. He couldn't conceive of a world where his careful plans might unravel. The breakthrough came 6 weeks into their investigation. Franklin Edwards, the former CFO, agreed to meet with Jessica at a small restaurant in New Jersey, far from the prying eyes of Manhattan's financial elite. He talked, Jessica announced, striding into Olivia's office where Catherine was waiting. She dropped a thumb drive on the table. For 3 hours, and he brought receipts. The evidence was damning. Franklin had meticulously documented years of financial fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, bribes to foreign officials, manipulation of stock prices. The Blackwood Financial Group's sterling reputation was built on a foundation of systematic corruption. This is more than we hoped for, Olivia said as they reviewed the files. With this, we could potentially trigger federal investigations into the entire Blackwood operation. Catherine stared at the screen, feeling numb. I lived with him for 5 years, she whispered. I knew he was cold, even cruel in his way. But this... Olivia placed a hand on her shoulder. People like Maxwell are experts at compartmentalization. The man you saw at home was just one facet of who he is. Catherine nodded slowly, then straightened her shoulders. What's our next move? We could go to the federal authorities, Olivia suggested. The SEC, FBI, IRS, they'd all be interested in this information. No, Catherine said after a moment's consideration. Not yet. That would trigger a public scandal immediately, and Maxwell would know where it came from. He'd start destroying evidence, calling in favors from his political connections. What do you suggest? Jessica asked, intrigued by the strategic mind that had emerged from behind Catherine's carefully cultivated society wife persona. "We need to be more precise," Catherine said, her voice steady. "More surgical. Maxwell values two things above all else, his reputation and his legacy. We need to target both." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had both imprisoned and now liberated her. The annual Blackwood Foundation Gala is in 3 weeks. It's their biggest event of the year. Every important business partner, every political connection, every social ally will be there. She turned back to face Olivia and Jessica. "So will we." Olivia looked skeptical. "You want to confront him? Publicly? That's risky, Catherine. The Blackwoods control the narrative in those circles." "Not confront," Catherine clarified. "Outmaneuver." At that gala, Maxwell will be announcing the establishment of the new Blackwood Center for Financial Innovation, a $50 million project that's meant to cement his legacy as a visionary in the industry. It's his pet project, something he's been working toward for years. "How do you know this?" Jessica asked. "Because I helped plan it," Catherine replied. "Before everything, the architectural plans, the founding documentation, the partner agreements, I oversaw all of it. It was the one project he actually trusted me with, probably because he saw it as mere event planning, rather than actual business." A slow smile spread across Olivia's face as she began to understand. "And as the overseer of the project, you have access to all the documentation." "Complete access," Catherine confirmed, "including the ability to make certain adjustments." "What kind of adjustments?" Jessica asked. Catherine's expression was calm but determined. "The kind that will show Maxwell exactly what it feels like to have the future you believed in revealed as a carefully constructed lie." For the next 3 weeks, Catherine worked with precision and purpose. By day, she finalized her plans with Olivia and Jessica. By night, she prepared herself mentally for the confrontation to come. The evening of the gala arrived, and Catherine stood in her new apartment studying her reflection. Gone was the demure society wife with her conservative dresses and subtle makeup. In her place stood a woman transformed, sleek, confident, powerful in a midnight blue gown that made no apologies for commanding attention. Her phone chimed with a text from Olivia. "Everything is in place. The team is ready. Are you sure about this?" Catherine took a deep breath, remembering the years of gaslighting, the deliberate medical sabotage, the public humiliation. She thought of all the women trapped in gilded cages of their own, silenced by wealth and tradition and the fear of standing alone. "I'm sure," she typed back. "It's time." The Blackwood Foundation Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Temple of Dendur into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Under the soaring glass ceiling, New York's elite moved, in carefully choreographed social patterns, champagne flutes in hand, deals and alliances forming and dissolving with each conversation. Catherine arrived precisely 45 minutes after the event began, late enough to ensure Maxwell would be deep in his role as magnanimous host, but early enough for what was to come. As she handed her wrap to the attendant, she felt rather than saw the ripple of attention her entrance created. "Is that Catherine Blackwood? I thought she was in Europe. Did you hear about Vanessa? 5 months pregnant, I'm told. Maxwell can't legally marry her, of course, but apparently there's some arrangement." The whispers followed her as she moved through the crowd. Catherine acknowledged acquaintances with poised nods, but didn't stop to chat. From across the room, she spotted Maxwell holding court with the mayor and several prominent business leaders. Vanessa stood beside him, resplendent in a designer maternity gown, her hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. "Right on time," came Olivia's voice as she appeared at Catherine's side, elegant in a tailored black suit. "Jessica is in position with the technical team. Franklin just arrived through the service entrance." Catherine nodded, her eyes still on Maxwell. "And the documentation?" "All set, on your signal." Catherine accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter but didn't drink. "Then let's mingle. I want to take the temperature of the room before we proceed." They separated, Catherine moving purposefully through the crowd. She spoke briefly with Thomas Blackwood, who seemed genuinely pleased to see her, and evaded Eleanor with practiced grace. She noted which of Maxwell's business associates seemed nervous at her presence and which seemed oblivious to the storm about to break. Finally, it was Maxwell himself who approached her, his expression a mask of controlled surprise. "Catherine, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us tonight." His voice carried just enough warmth to seem appropriate to onlookers, but Catherine caught the cold calculation in his eyes. "I wouldn't miss it," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The Blackwood Center announcement is the culmination of so much work. My work, if you recall." A flicker of annoyance crossed his features before he smoothed it away. "Yes, well, we've made some adjustments to the plans since your departure. Vanessa has brought some fresh perspectives to the project." "I'm sure she has," Catherine replied evenly. "Speaking of perspectives, there are some people very interested in hearing yours tonight." Before Maxwell could respond, the sound system chimed, signaling the start of the formal program. He gave her a last suspicious look before moving toward the small stage that had been set up beneath the ancient Egyptian temple. Catherine watched. Him go then touched the small communication device concealed in her earring. "He's on his way to the stage. Are we ready?" "All systems go," came Jessica's voice. "The files are uploaded. Franklin is standing by." "And our special guests?" "Just arrived, being escorted to their seats now." Catherine moved to her own designated seat in the front row, directly in Maxwell's line of sight. She wanted him to see her face when it happened. The lights dimmed slightly as Maxwell took the stage too. Enthusiastic applause. He was, Catherine had to admit, masterful at these performances, confident, charismatic, with just the right blend of humility and authority. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him, knowing what was about to unfold. "Distinguished guests, dear friends," Maxwell began, his voice echoing through the perfect acoustics of the space. "Tonight marks not just another Blackwood Foundation gala, but the beginning of a new chapter in financial innovation and education." He continued with practiced ease, outlining the vision for the Blackwood Center, a state-of-the-art facility that would combine research, education, and incubation spaces for financial technology ventures. Behind him, a massive screen displayed architectural renderings and promotional materials that Catherine herself had commissioned months earlier. "The future of finance will be written at the Blackwood Center," Maxwell declared. "And that future begins tonight with the announcement of our founding partners." He gestured toward the screen, which was supposed to display the logos of the prestigious institutions that had committed to the project. Instead, the screen flickered, then changed to display a different set of documents altogether, internal Blackwood financial records, highlighting years of systematic fraud. Maxwell faltered, confusion crossing his face as he turned to look at the screen. Catherine watched. As realization dawned in his eyes, followed by alarm, he turned back to the audience, attempting to maintain his composure. "It seems we're experiencing some technical difficulties," he said smoothly. "If you'll bear with us for a moment." But the difficulties continued. The screen now displayed emails between Maxwell and various officials, clear evidence of bribery and corruption. Then came medical records, Catherine's fertility treatments alongside the contradictory medication that had been prescribed to sabotage them. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. Maxwell's face had gone pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the podium. This is some kind of hack," he stammered. "Security!" Catherine rose from her seat and walked calmly to the stage. The crowd parted before her, all eyes moving between her and the damning evidence still cycling across the screen. "Not a hack, Maxwell," she said, her voice clear and steady as she took the microphone from his stunned grasp. "Just the truth. Finally." She turned to address the crowd, which had fallen into stunned silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unexpected change to tonight's program, but I believe in transparency, especially when it comes to institutions we trust with our money, our reputations, and our futures." Catherine gestured to the screen, which now displayed the prescription orders for the medication that had sabotaged her fertility. "For 5 years, I believed I was failing. As a wife, because I couldn't conceive a child, I endured medical procedures, family humiliation, and my husband's contempt. never knowing that Maxwell himself had arranged for me to be given medication that would prevent pregnancy. Eleanor Blackwood stood up, her face mottled with rage. "This is preposterous. How dare you?" "I have the medical records, Eleanor," Catherine interrupted calmly, "and the testimony of the doctors involved. But that's just my personal tragedy. The real story is much larger." She nodded to Jessica, who advanced the presentation to show the financial documents. Blackwood Financial Group has systematically engaged in tax evasion, money laundering, and securities fraud. The legacy we're celebrating tonight is built on corruption. Maxwell lunged for the microphone, but Catherine sidestepped him gracefully. "Security!" he shouted. "Remove her immediately!" "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a new voice from the back of the room. A distinguished man in a dark suit walked forward, flanked by several others in similar attire. He held up a badge. "Special Agent Carter, Securities and Exchange Commission, and these are my colleagues from the FBI and IRS Criminal Investigation Division." Maxwell froze, his face ashen. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. "We've been investigating Blackwood Financial for some time," Agent Carter continued, "but Mrs. Blackwood's evidence has accelerated our timeline considerably." He turned to Maxwell. "We have some questions for you, Mr. Blackwood. I suggest you answer them voluntarily." Catherine watched as Maxwell's carefully constructed world imploded around him. His business associates began edging away, creating physical distance that mirrored the social isolation soon to come. Eleanor Blackwood sat down heavily, her imperious demeanor crumbling. Vanessa looked between Maxwell and the federal agents, calculation evident in her eyes. Thomas approached Catherine, genuine regret on his face. "I had no idea," he said quietly, "about any of it. The business, what he did to you. Catherine, I'm so sorry." She nodded, accepting his apology, but not yet ready to absolve anyone named Blackwood. Her attention was drawn back to Maxwell, who was now engaged in an intense conversation with his attorneys who had materialized at his side. "Catherine," Olivia whispered, appearing at her elbow. "We should go. You've done what you came to do." But Catherine shook her head. Not quite. She stepped forward again, reclaiming the microphone one last time. "Before I leave you all to enjoy what remains of your evening, I have one final announcement." Her voice rang out clearly over the murmuring crowd. "I am establishing the Sinclair Foundation for Women's Empowerment, dedicated to helping women trapped in situations of financial and emotional control. The foundation will provide legal assistance, career counseling, and support services to women seeking independence from toxic relationships." She paused, letting her gaze move deliberately to Maxwell. "The foundation will be initially funded by my divorce settlement from Maxwell Blackwood, which I intend to pursue to the fullest extent of the law. Not because I want his money," she smiled slightly, "but because justice should be expensive for those who can afford it." With that, Catherine handed the microphone to Agent Carter and walked calmly through the stunned crowd. As she reached the exit, she heard Maxwell calling her name, a note of desperation in his voice that she had never heard before. She didn't look back. Outside, the cool night air felt like freedom against her skin. Jessica was waiting with a car, ready to whisk her away from the chaos erupting behind her. "Well," Jessica said with a grin as Catherine slid into the back seat, "that was quite a show. How does it feel?" Catherine took a deep breath, letting the tension of the confrontation drain away. "It feels like..." She searched for the right word. "Awakening. Like I've been asleep for 5 years and I'm finally truly awake." As the car pulled away from the museum, Catherine glanced back at the glittering gala now in disarray. She had entered that building 5 years ago as a bride, stepping into a gilded cage of her own making. Tonight she had walked out of it as herself, Catherine Sinclair reborn. 1 year later, the converted brownstone in Brooklyn's Park Slope neighborhood hummed with activity. In what had once been a formal dining room, a group of women sat in a circle, their faces reflecting various stages of healing, some still raw with pain, others glowing with newfound confidence. Catherine stood at the edge of the room, watching as the support group session concluded. "Remember," said the facilitator, a warm-voiced therapist named Diane, "your worth is not determined by the relationships that failed you. It's determined by the strength you find in rebuilding." As the women gathered their belongings and began to disperse, many stopped to speak with Catherine, sharing updates on court cases, new jobs, or simply offering thanks. This was the heart of the Sinclair Foundation, a safe harbor for women, reclaiming their autonomy after years of financial and emotional control. "Ms. Sinclair?" a young woman approached hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, your story changed my life. I was engaged to someone who was already showing signs of the same controlling behavior you described. I broke it off last month." Catherine smiled, genuinely touched. "That took courage." "Less than you think," the woman replied. "After hearing what you went through, well, it made my decision easier." She squeezed Catherine's hand briefly before joining the others heading out. Olivia appeared in the doorway, her usual sleek suit replaced by casual weekend wear. "Another successful session." "Seems that way," Catherine replied, walking with her friend toward the back office. "How was court yesterday?" "Brutal but satisfying," Olivia grinned. "Judge Walters denied Maxwell's latest appeal. The SEC penalties stand, and so does your settlement." In the months following the gala, Maxwell's empire had collapsed with stunning speed. The federal investigations had uncovered even more extensive corruption than Catherine had known about. While he had avoided prison through plea agreements that involved massive financial penalties and industry bans, his reputation was in tatters, his fortune diminished, and his legacy destroyed. The divorce settlement had been finalized 6 months, ergo, awarding Catherine a substantial portion of the Blackwood assets. True to her word, she had channeled most of it into the Sinclair Foundation, keeping only enough to ensure her own independence and the foundation's future. "Any word on Vanessa?" Catherine asked, as they settled into the comfortable office that overlooked a small garden. "Still living in Connecticut with the baby," Olivia replied. "According to our sources, she negotiated her own settlement from Maxwell before the worst of the scandal broke. Smart woman, in her own ruthless way." Catherine nodded, feeling no animosity toward the woman who had been her replacement. Vanessa had been a player in Maxwell's game, just as she herself had been. The difference was that Vanessa had understood the rules better, or perhaps had just been more willing to play by them. "And Thomas?" Catherine asked. "Doing well, actually. He's completely restructured what remains of Blackwood Financial, renamed it, and established new compliance protocols that are being hailed as industry gold standards." Olivia gave Catherine a sidelong glance. "He asks about you, you know." Catherine smiled but shook her head slightly. "I'm not ready for anything connected to that name. Maybe someday, but not yet." The truth was, Catherine had found an unexpected peace in her independence. The past year had been transformative, not just in establishing the foundation, but in rediscovering her own passions. She had enrolled in courses to update her architectural knowledge and had recently taken on her first small project, redesigning a community center in Queens. Her phone chimed with a message, and Catherine glanced at it with a frown. "Problem?" Olivia asked. "Eleanor Blackwood wants to meet," Catherine said, surprised. "Tomorrow at the Pierre?" Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "Eleanor? What could she possibly want?" "I guess I'll find out," Catherine replied, already composing a brief acceptance. She was curious enough to agree, and secure enough now to face whatever Eleanor might have to say. The following afternoon, Catherine arrived at the Pierre Hotel precisely on time, wearing a simple but elegant dress that reflected her new aesthetic, confident but understated. Eleanor was already seated in the tea room, her appearance markedly changed from when Catherine had last seen her. The imperious matriarch seemed diminished somehow, the haughty posture now more defensive than commanding. "Thank you for coming," Eleanor said, as Catherine sat across from her. "No air kisses today, no false warmth, just simple if stiff courtesy." "I was intrigued by your invitation," Catherine replied. A server approached, and they went through the motions of ordering tea. When they were alone again, Eleanor spoke, with uncharacteristic directness. I've come to apologize, Catherine, for my role in what happened to you. Catherine kept her expression neutral, though she was genuinely surprised. Your role. I knew, Eleanor admitted, her gaze dropping momentarily to her perfectly manicured hands. About the medication, not. At first, but eventually. Maxwell told me it was necessary, that you weren't suitable to be the mother of a Blackwood heir, that you were too independent in your thinking. The irony wasn't lost on Catherine. And you agreed with him. I did, Eleanor acknowledged. The Blackwood legacy has always been preserved through careful curation of the family. I believed Maxwell was doing what was necessary. She looked up, meeting Catherine's eyes directly. I was wrong. The admission hung between them, heavier than either had expected. Why tell me this now? Catherine asked. Finally? Because I've lost everything that mattered to me, Eleanor said simply. My son's reputation, the family standing, my own social position. It's clarifying. To lose things you've spent a lifetime building makes you question the foundation they were built on. Catherine studied the older woman, seeing for the first time the human being beneath the Blackwood matriarch persona. I appreciate your honesty, Eleanor, but if you're seeking forgiveness— I'm not, Eleanor interrupted. Some things shouldn't be forgiven. I'm just trying to make amends in whatever small way I can. She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. This is for your foundation. Anonymous, of course. Catherine opened the envelope and couldn't hide her surprise at the amount on the check. This is substantial. It's what I have left that's truly mine, Eleanor said. My mother's inheritance. I've always kept it separate from the Blackwood finances. A faint, rueful smile touched her lips. Perhaps I never fully trusted them either. After Eleanor left, Catherine remained at the table, contemplating the encounter. There was a certain symmetry to it, Eleanor's private funds now flowing, to help women escape situations that Eleanor herself had helped perpetuate. Not redemption exactly, but a kind of karmic rebalancing. Catherine's reflections were interrupted by another text message, this one from Thomas, extending a dinner invitation for the following week. No agenda, he wrote, just reconnecting as friends if you're open to it. She found herself smiling as she typed a tentative acceptance. Thomas had always been different from the rest of the Blackwoods, more genuine, less calculating. Perhaps there was room in her new life for carefully chosen connections to her past. 3 days later, Catherine stood on the roof deck of her Brooklyn building, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold and rose. Behind her, the small gathering of friends, Olivia, Jessica, several women from the foundation, and colleagues from her new architectural projects, chatted and laughed, celebrating the first anniversary of the Sinclair Foundation. Penny for your thoughts, said Jessica, joining her at the railing. Just reflecting, Catherine replied. A year ago, I couldn't imagine being here, being this version of myself. You were always this version, Jessica observed. You just needed the space to remember it. As if on cue, Catherine's phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced down to see Maxwell Blackwood's name in the headline. Former finance titan Blackwood relocates to Dubai amid ongoing legal troubles. Running away, Jessica commented, reading over her shoulder. Looking for a fresh start, maybe, Catherine said, surprising herself with the lack of bitterness in her voice. Everyone deserves that, I suppose. Even him? Catherine considered the question. I don't wish him ill anymore. That's not forgiveness. It's just freedom from letting him occupy any space in my emotions. She put her phone away and turned back to her guests, her chosen family now. Tomorrow she had a meeting with potential clients for her growing architectural practice, then a foundation board meeting to discuss expanding their services. Next week, a cautious dinner with Thomas to see if friendship was possible. And beyond, that a future entirely of her own design. As Catherine rejoined her friends, accepting a glass of champagne for the upcoming toast, she felt a sense of profound contentment. The cage that had once confined her hadn't just been opened, it had been dismantled completely. its gilded bars melted down and reforged into something infinitely more valuable, a life authentically lived on her own terms. Olivia tapped her glass, calling for attention. "To Catherine," she said, raising her glass, "and to all women who find the courage to rewrite their stories." "To new beginnings," Catherine added, her voice strong and clear in the twilight, "and to the beautiful truth that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be." Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Catherine's journey from a gilded cage to true freedom has moved you as deeply as it has moved us. Her transformation reminds us all that it's never too late to reclaim our power and rewrite our stories. If you've enjoyed this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about resilience and self-discovery. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If Catherine's story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexities and the strength of the human spirit. What moment in Catherine's journey spoke to you the most? Was it her discovery of Maxwell's betrayal, her powerful confrontation at the gala, or perhaps her journey of rebuilding? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us create more content that touches hearts and inspires minds. Until our next story together, remember that your past doesn't define your future. You have the power to reshape your destiny, just like Catherine did.